In this video, I'm going to share my story about how I made over $1 million as a software developer by the age of 30 and how I translated that into $1 million of net worth also. I'll tell you how I did all that and also some lessons that I learned along the way so that you can see what's possible and implement some of these ideas yourself. So if you're new around here, a really quick background. So I'm Gregory, and on this channel, I teach you how to become a blockchain developer. And that's the area of software development that I currently specialize in. I've been focusing on blockchain for the past few years, and it's played a huge role in making my first $1 million as a developer. And I think blockchain is going to make a lot of other people first-time millionaires, especially those of us who get in and learn these skills early. So if that's something that you're interested in, then smash the like button down below for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to this channel. And if you want to learn how to master blockchain step by step from somebody who's made over $1 million as a developer, then head on over to dappuniversity.com/bootcamp to get started today. All right, so let's get into this story. And really quickly, just a little bit of background. I basically started this process from scratch, okay? So I graduated from college with zero marketable skills. I only had a few $1,000s in my bank account, and all the skills that I used to make this money and invest it, I had to learn on my own. I don't say any of that to brag or sound high and mighty. I just want to show you what the actual starting point was so that you're clear and then you can see what's possible. I graduated from college. I didn't get a computer science degree. In fact, I actually got a degree for music. And for the first few years out of college, that's what I did. I was a working musician. I went on tours. I made recordings. I did pretty much anything you could think of to make money with music. And for a while, that was my only goal. I just wanted to make a living doing that. But I couldn't quite make ends meet just doing that, so I looked for other ways to supplement my income. And at the time, I actually made a website for myself to promote my own music, and I thought, hey, I could do this for somebody else. And I found other people that needed websites, and so I just made them. But I'll be really clear, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I wasn't really a coder. These were really just point-and-click websites. It was just point-and-click websites as a service, nothing advanced. But, I could make a few $100 extra whenever I did that, and so I did. But after a while, I realized that even if I could just scrape by doing that, it probably still wasn't going to be enough for me to support a family or do anything else besides just play music for a living. So that's when I decided that I needed to do something else. And I just took the next logical step and said, hey, okay, I'll just learn this stuff for real. And so that was my goal. I was going to learn to become a real developer and keep playing music and just do this on the side. I'm going to pause the story here for a second and say, I realized how crazy that sounds. In fact, there were a lot of people who thought I was crazy. They were like, you're making a huge mistake. You don't know what you're doing and you're going to fail. And so there were definitely naysayers. And to make matters worse, I didn't even know anybody who was a real world developer at the time who could help me on this process. I had to go looking for them, all right? So it wasn't like I just had all these friends who were developers that I could just go hang out with and learn from them and see that they had results. I just assumed that this was a viable option because it's maybe developers make a lot of money. And so I had to go find one that could actually validate this for me and show me where to start. And luckily, I was able to do that through someone who I toured with, actually. They knew a developer. I talked to them. He kind of pointed me in the right direction, showed me what to learn, and set me off on my initial course. And so from that point, I went all in on learning how to code. I bought courses. I signed up for subscription websites. I went to meetups. And actually, at that point, I applied to a coding boot camp, okay? And I got rejected. All right? I didn't even get in. I actually recorded a video about that. You should watch it. It's a pretty crazy story. And after I got rejected from coding boot camp, I had no choice but to just teach myself and press forward. So that's what I did. And I used all these different, self-learning resources to do that. And so at that point, I was doing basically two things. I was playing music to make money. I was touring a lot. And I was learning how to code to become a freelancer, while I was doing that at the same time. So I'd go on the road, play shows and code while I was going down the road and in hotel rooms late at night. And then when I would come back, I would have longer breaks, and that would allow me to focus large amounts of time on learning software development, which was hugely beneficial. And so also at this point, something else really critical happened. So one of the guys that I toured with, he owned rental properties and he talked about it all the time. And he was the first person that I knew who did this. And it showed me that real estate investment was something that normal people could get into. And I eventually did that. And that was a really big part of how I've turned this $1 million into also $1 million worth of net worth, which I'll talk about here in a minute. All right, so back to coding. I had been learning like crazy for 4 to 5 months. And at this point, I was ready to jump in and start looking for work, even if I wasn't quite ready yet, okay? Because I knew the value of just getting my name out there, and so that's what I decided to do. I built a developer portfolio, I started going to local meetups, and I eventually met a mentor at one of these meetups who ended up giving me my first freelancing job as a developer. And that took a few months of networking, but if you zoom out and look at the big timeline here, that means that it only took about 6 to 7 months for me to start working as a developer, okay? So if you go from like day one of like the very first day that I ever started learning how to code to about 6 to 7 months later was when I got my first freelancing job. And at the time, my first job I think was $65 per hour. And that was a huge deal for me compared to like my first year out of college, where I think I only made like $10,000 the entire year. And after that, stuff started to move really fast. I leaned hard into freelancing, and eventually I phased out of my music work entirely. And so after a few months of freelancing, I was starting to make like $8,000 to $10,000 a month, which was breaking 6 figures per year for me at that point. And I didn't even know that was possible at the time. And that was a really reality bending moment. And if you want to zoom out for more perspective, that basically means that from the day I learned to code till about 1 year later, I was making over 100 grand per year as a developer. And that scaled up my income pretty fast, all right? And so I hovered around this range for a few years, and I actually stopped freelancing full-time at one point and took like a full-time remote developer job for a while, okay? And I was hovering around this price point, maybe like $120,000, $130,000 per year. But while I was at this job, I did a lot of really important stuff that were critical for this journey. And I'll call those out right now. All right, so the first thing is that I saved like half of my income, right? I lived way below my means. And I took all that extra money and started investing it. I was buying real estate, and that was a huge factor in building up this net worth because the market was really appreciating. I even did some flips and things like that. And it was also during this time that I got interested in blockchain technology by watching cryptocurrency prices go up like crazy during 2017. And so at that point, I knew that I wanted to learn that technology as fast as I possibly could. And so I did, and I actually started freelancing as a blockchain developer while I was still working that regular job and started making videos about blockchain development. And so after I learned blockchain, I scaled up my income even further and broke past the multiple 6-figure per year mark and have been there ever since. And so, over time, I left that job, and that's what I do now, full time. I do freelance blockchain development and also do Dapp University. And it was after this transition into blockchain that I crossed that $1 million mark, okay? So how long did this whole process take? All right, so it's kind of hard to know for sure because I'm not exactly, 100% certain like where I crossed that threshold, but I'll say it in really safe terms, okay? So from the day that I started, making my first dollar as a developer to crossing that, $1 million mark safely, that was about 6 years, maybe a little less, okay? And thinking about it a different way, from the day that I first learned how to write my first line of code to the day that I crossed that $1 million mark, that was about 7 years, safely. So, if you'd told me on the very first day that I learned to write my first line of code that 7 years later I would be a millionaire, I don't know that I would have really believed you. But it's sort of those reality bending realizations when you can actually see what's possible because someone else has done it, that you can see what's truly possible for yourself. And now I'll be fully transparent with you. I don't make $1 million per year yet. That is a goal of mine, but I do have $1 million of net worth, $1 million of assets, and I have, of course, earned over $1 million of income as a developer. And I've checked a lot of those boxes because of being a developer, and specializing in blockchain has got me there a lot faster for sure. So now I want to break some of that down so that you can see how all this is played out. So here's the rough timeline of how all this happened. So 2013 was the year that I learned to code. And then 2014 was the year that I got my first freelancing job. And during that year, I think I made a total of about, maybe $70,000. Okay. But later on in this year is when I broke into the 6-figure territory because I started making about $8,000 to $10,000 per month. And I stayed at that 6-figure level for a couple of years. I think pretty much throughout 2015 through most of 2017. So we'll say 6 figures here. And then, and 2017 was the year that I really got into blockchain and started mastering those skills. And during 2018 is when I actually broke into the multi 6-figure level. And it was sometime in here, in the past few years when I actually crossed that $1 million mark in terms of, how much money I made over my entire developer career. I made over $1 million. And now, of course, that's just $1 million of income earned, but I've also managed to accumulate $1 million worth of assets and also $1 million of net worth. Now, net worth is actually really hard for me to track, precisely, and I'll explain why, okay? I can't just go to a stock portfolio and look at like an exact number of how much, money I have. I can't do that with like a cryptocurrency portfolio either, because a lot of my net worth is tied up in assets that have to be appraised and ultimately sold to turn into cash value. So for example, real estate and a business. So these things both have to be appraised, and it's hard to tell exactly how much they're worth until someone buys them from you. But even at conservative estimates, all of this still adds up to over $1 million. And so I'll break that down right now. All right, so here's a really rough graph of how my net worth is organized. All right, and this is not very precise. Like I said, this stuff's hard to appraise, hard to estimate, but here's a rough breakdown of how it works. So a good chunk of this is residential real estate, like I talked about a minute ago. I currently own 3 properties, working on 4 and 5 actually right now. So some of this cash is going to move into this real estate here pretty soon. But this real estate alone, just the assets, is worth about $1 million, maybe a little more. But I do have loans on these, all right? So that takes the net worth in that real estate down to be a smaller part of this pie. And so yeah, next is cash. I got a good amount of cash sitting around that's about to move into real estate pretty soon. And so the next is business. And what I do here at Dapp University earns revenue, and that can ultimately be sold to somebody else. And this part of the pie is based on a pretty conservative estimate of what it's actually worth. And so the next is cryptocurrency. All right, I own a good amount of that. And then last is just like other. So, cars, just general stuff that I own. And again, this breakdown is not really precise, but it gives you a rough idea of where everything is. So now I want to talk about some lessons that I've learned on this journey so that they can help you, because I did not know these things when I first started, and now I do after having gone down this road, okay? So the very first thing is that this has not been easy, but it has totally been worth it. There are definitely opportunities out there to get rich fast and easy. For example, you could have just bought a few $1,000s worth of cryptocurrency at the beginning of 2017 and then sold it a year later at the beginning of 2018 and made $1 million. Those opportunities are definitely out there. So I didn't personally do that. I took a different route, but I still got here relatively quickly on the grand scheme of things, like 6 to 7 years. So that's kind of fast in one sense, but on the other end, it's also 6 to 7 years of really hard work. And this is a really common story because almost all the millionaires that I personally know got there by working really hard and also being smart and disciplined with their money in some way. And of course, there's always, quote unquote, luck involved, doors opening, whatever you want to call it. But even if you isolate for those factors, almost everyone that I know have both of those characteristics. And so that's the route that I took that got me here. And it was really hard, but it paid off big time. And so the next lesson is to focus on the long term, not the short term. This was a really hard lesson for me to learn at the beginning, okay? Because if you're like me, it's really easy to watch a video like this, get inspired, and then go out and say, I'm gonna do the same thing. And then, a month later, you don't see the results, you get demotivated, and you just give up, okay? Trust me, I've wanted to do this several times. But over time, I had to develop the ability to focus on the long term, even if the short-term results weren't coming. And this is really hard because we're always, trapped in this cycle of, instant gratification. If you have a cell phone, people talk about the dopamine addiction that you get from being on social media, even watching videos like this. It can make it harder to cultivate that long-term discipline, but it's totally required in order for you to, achieve these bigger long-term goals. And when you're trying to build a career like this, you really have to optimize your decisions for the long term, not just the short term. So for example, if you're starting a business, sometimes you have to do things right now that won't instantly make you money, but they'll make you a lot more money later. So sometimes when you're starting a business, you make zero money, negative money, or, hardly any money at all. And I know not everybody out there wants to start a business. That's fine, but you can still take this as an example because, ultimately you want to be the entrepreneur of your own life, so to speak. I think I probably stole that from Peter Thiel. But if you apply that to yourself, if you're always doing what's best in the long term, then eventually you're going to start reaping the benefits of that over time. And that's personally helped me quite a bit on this journey. And that brings me to the next point or the next lesson, which is to trust in the process itself and not actually the results. And that's kind of saying the same thing as the last point, but I'll clarify what I mean by that. I don't really watch the scoreboard that much. And that's why it's kind of tricky for me to actually figure out, like, when did I cross that $1 million mark? Actually, I was just thinking about it the other day. I was like, did I do that? And then it gave me the idea to make this video. And I know it's kind of crazy for like a light bulb just to go off in your head and suddenly realize that you're a millionaire, but that's actually an indicator of my mindset. So I'll clarify what I mean by that. So I'm very focused on the present, about what am I doing right now, and is it the best decision for me over the long term? And so I'm also thinking about the future. I don't think that much about the past. I don't think that much about what the current results are. I'm mostly just thinking about what should I be doing right now, and is it going to get me to where I want to go over the long term? So that's focusing on the process, and the results come later. So for you as a developer, if you are always focusing on, getting better at your craft, getting better at negotiating your rates, all that kind of stuff, if you're a freelancer and finding more work, if you're always doing the same kinds of things over and over and over and over again for the same fixed amount of hours per week, like, you're never changing the amount of time that you're spending doing that. You're just changing how you're spending that time. And over the long term, that can generate you more money. But you don't want to necessarily focus on how much money am I making right now. You want to make sure you're doing the right things that will actually make you more money down the road. That's what it means to trust in the actual process itself and not the current results. And that's been a really hard thing for me to learn, but it has been critical. All right, so the next big thing is that online education and also hands-on mentorship have been critical for me achieving these goals in a relatively short amount of time. I've literally paid tens of thousands of dollars in online courses, mentors, coaches, consultants, et cetera, to learn how to do what I've actually done. And that's one of the big reasons I'm such a big believer in online education, is because I've benefited from it so much, and so many other people have too. So one reason that mentorship is so important is because, honestly, most people just don't know what they're talking about. So if you can find someone who has the kinds of results that you want, who actually does know what they're talking about, you can basically just ignore everybody else and then listen to what that person is telling you and make a lot of your decisions around that. And if you can't get access to real life mentors, then, I'm also a big believer in virtual mentorship too. You can see my bookshelf back there. So I love books, but I don't have a lot of time these days to sit around and just read books and do nothing else. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks now when I exercise, and that allows me to get through about one book per week. And my goal in doing that is basically to try to get exposed to as many ideas as I possibly can, rather than try to study the book for a test. And that actually translates into a pretty large number of life-changing ideas that I pick up on every single year because I do that. All right, so what's it like? All right, maybe that's the next point, because I know a lot of you are going to have this question. I know I would have, what's it like to have made $1 million, have $1 million in net worth, all that kind of stuff. Well, I'll say I live a pretty normal life. Honestly, the biggest benefits that I get from this are having freedom and options, and not being just constrained to having to do one thing that I don't want to do. And that's the biggest one that I experience on a day-to-day basis. So let me clarify that a little bit, right? So like I said, I live a pretty normal life. I don't drive a fancy car. I live in a normal looking place. So I don't really spend a lot of my income, all right? But I get this benefit of not having to do things I don't really want to do. And also I can be generous with the money that I have for other people as well. And so those are the biggest benefits that I personally get. And now there's a lot of people out there that would look at this and say, hey man, that's not that much. You've got nothing compared to me. In fact, the amount of money that I have now wouldn't really be enough for me to sustain that for the rest of my life, without question. And even if I did, I still wouldn't just sit back and do nothing at this point in my life. I would still do something that was productive and rewarding. And so that's why right now I want to keep going. And that's why I'm in growth mode. I don't want to just sit back and retire. I want to be in a much better place when that day actually comes. Okay. So that's why right now I'm more focused on becoming a massive income earner than a passive income earner. Because if you, create a larger amount of wealth, then that eventually can be converted into cash flow for passive income later. Now, I do earn some passive income now. I've talked about that on this channel. I think it's a great thing for you to do, but it's not what I spend personally all my time focused on at this point in my life. I'm not saying you can't do it. That may be your sole strategy, is to get all these really great passive income ideas working for you. That's totally cool. But I'm just telling you about what I personally do right now. So that's the story about how I made $1 million as a software developer and what I learned along the way. So hopefully there's something inside of there that you can benefit from and take away from this video, all right? Because there's a whole lot of opportunity out there. Like I said, I think that blockchain is going to make a lot of other people new millionaires, for the first time. And so I'm really excited about that prospect. So if you want to learn more about this technology and how to become a highly paid blockchain developer, then of course, subscribe to the channel, smash the like button down below. And if you want to get started today, you can just go to my YouTube homepage and find any of the free courses that I've put out there. They're basically like Udemy courses, but they're totally free. And if you want to take that next step or just take a massive shortcut entirely, then I can show you how to master blockchain step by step from scratch over at dappuniversity.com/bootcamp. All right, that's all I got. And until next time, thanks for watching Dapp University.